Hello, everybody. It's Cindy Ingram, and welcome to the Art and Self podcast. And what I have for you today is an introduction to my brand new podcast. And this podcast is a collaborative podcast with my friend and book publisher, Heather Doyle Fraser, who you have heard on the podcast twice now. And when we were working on my book together, we really resonated with each other. We have a lot in common, and we really enjoy talking about creativity and the creative process and writing and making art and all those things. It's something we always really relish in talking about. And the more we talk about it together, the more we realize we have a lot to say about this and a lot in common about this. So we decided to start our own podcast, just the two of us, called Spacious Creative. And it is on its own podcast thread. You can search for Spacious Creative and you'll find it on your podcast players. You'll also find it over on Substack on Spacious Creative, which is the link is thespaciouscreative.substack.com. But I thought I would share the first episode with you on here so you can get a taste of the podcast. And this podcast will be a limited series. I think we're planning about 8 or 9 episodes. And we also have a free workshop coming up on July 24th called Trust Your Why, Your Creative Comfort Zone Needs You. And in that workshop, we're going to be looking at art. We're going to be doing experiential activities all around this idea that people say you have to grow to be out of your to grow, you have to be out of your comfort zone. And both of us really disagree with that premise and believe something completely different. So we're going to be talking about that in our workshop as well, and sort of the reasons why you should, and I hate to say should, but why, if you're feeling that call to be creative, why you should listen to it and start being creative. So anyway, without further ado, here is our first episode. It's really starting with the beginning and talking about our creative roots and our creative journeys, but we weave in a lot of topics about creativity in there, and I'm sure you'll find yourself in this discussion. We'll be posting episodes weekly on Thursdays for this limited series up until at least the end of August. All right, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you at the workshop on July 24th. You can register for that at cindyingram.com/trust. All right, here's the episode. Welcome to Spacious Creative. I am Cindy Ingram.
And I am Heather Doyle Fraser. And in this podcast, we're exploring the process and practice of creativity, but with the foundation in compassion.
In this limited series, we'll dive into how creative expression shows up in our lives, from childhood inspirations to the challenges of perfectionism and everything in between.
Whether you're reconnecting with your inner child or reimagining your creative identity and how you can harness more creativity in your life, Spacious Creative is here to inspire and support your journey. Cindy, I'm so glad we're talking about creativity today. I mean, every conversation that we have pretty much is around some kind of creative thing. And I just love talking about this with you.
I know, it's just the best. Like, I think every conversation we have ever had has been related to creativity in some capacity.
It's our lives. So yeah.
We live and breathe creativity.
Yeah.
So have you always been a creative person? What's your earliest memory of creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always viewed myself as a creative person because one of my core earliest memories, I had that feeling. And I mean, this is probably one of my first memories, of being a human. There's two, and they were at the same time or very, very close to the same time. Part one is my parents had gotten me this cardboard Holly Hobby house. This is the 1970s, early 1970s. And I'm probably like three-ish, like between 3 and 4. That's probably the time that it is. And I loved this Holly Hobby horse, not horse. I love this Holly Hobby house. And outside it looked, like it was, like colorful and everything. Inside it was just cardboard, brown cardboard. So that was a bit of a disappointment. I remember going in it and being like, oh. So then I brought in like crayons and different things and was drawing things on the inside to make it more colorful. I also brought in like I remember having a blanket in there, and like it was probably a bean bag or a pillow or something to sit on, because I remember sitting in there and I wasn't on the floor. And I already was, my dad read to me every night, even at that age. And I loved books even then. And so I remember wanting to write stuff. And in order to to like help me serve that, I guess, my mom gave me an old phone book. Um, Now, I don't know if anyone remembers what old phone books looked like, but they were very thick, paper's very thin, like tons of pages. So that's the thing that I was like, oh, I get this whole big gigantic thing. I can do whatever I want in it. And so I drew in it.
That was
I was
brilliant.
pretending to write in it. I mean, like, I wasn't really writing, I don't think at that point, but I was, for me. I felt like I was doing serious creative work. I remember like doing, like being in it and like, going through it. And I remember loving that feeling of just creating. And so that was part one of that. And then the other part of that memory, I don't know why these are so connected for me, but I remember waking up one morning and my mom came in the room, and I had woken up before she came in, and I had written a song with a melody and lyrics about spring and the Easter Bunny. And I sang it to her, and I thought it was the most brilliant. I mean, I literally was like so excited about this. And so I was like, this is the best song ever. Spring is here. That's what it's called. And um, I remember my mom was like, that's great. Yeah, that's great. But she also was a, singer-songwriter performer. So I had that in my life I was
Mhm.
already singing, I was already doing all of that, even at 3, like literally at 3. So she didn't react to it like I was expecting. It wasn't like a big deal. It was like, yeah, of course. So I didn't get like the pump that I wanted there.
Yeah.
I do remember feeling like, oh, but I still loved the song and I thought it was pretty awesome.
You still know the song?
I remember a little bit. I remember the beginning part of it and the beginning part of the melody, and it's very simple, as you would imagine from like, but spring is here, spring is here. Da 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 da. I don't remember what those like. Da 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 da. That's what it was, basically.
Awesome.
Probably something with the Easter Bunny in there, and also spring again and again.
What I like about this, and it's as you're talking, it's reminding me of like my own childhood and my own memories. And mine was similar in that like it's not limited to just one art form. You're
Right.
drawing, you're writing, you're making music. And when I think about myself as a child, like that's what it was too. It was all manners of expression.
Hmm. And we didn't think that we couldn't do that.
Yeah. Of course we can write a
Didn't,
song. Of course we,
right,
yeah.
right. And we didn't think that we had to be like one thing with art, of, like we're giving this broad like creativity and art kind of definition here, anything, not just like one modality. And you're a child, you think you can do it all because you can.
Yep. I love that. Yeah, I was the exact same way. Like I like I was always drawing. I do remember that. But then I play piano, and I would write my own music. I still have the sheet music. I never actually played it since then. I stopped when I was like in sixth grade when it stopped being fun. It was like the practicing was too like
I have a
I didn't
story
want to
about that too.
practice. Yeah. And I really wish I would have stayed with it because I was really good at it. I mean, I got like medals and stuff, but I I just I don't have a memory of me not being a creative child. Like I
Yeah,
was yeah,
same.
there's no part of my existence that ever was like, no, you weren't creative then and then you were.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like
I
that's like a core first memory. Yeah.
yeah, we had a little Muppet Babies keyboard, and that played, those keyboards like had some tunes that were already in there. And
Right.
we wrote a song, me and my sister wrote a song to the tune of the Muppets Baby keyboard, and we both can still sing it today. And I'm not gonna, you sang You're So Beautiful, but mine was like, God made the trees, God made the plants, God made the trees, God made the plants. Like it was this whole thing about it was about God, which is really funny to me now. And I used to like make for all holidays. I would decorate my room, but we didn't have like a lot of stuff. So I was like made them out of like I remember tissues, ghost set of tissues. I'm hanging from my ceiling fan, or I would make paper chains. It was just always redecorating my room and rearranging my room and like just always
Same.
in that like creative energy. And and then and then I grew up and then kind of stopped.
Mhm.
Did you stop at a certain
Yeah.
point?
So I I had like I remember when I got to school, I remember when in kindergarten, by that time I was reading and but nobody else was really. And my teacher didn't believe me that I was reading, I don't think at first. And then I would like do I would be able to read something and then she'd be like, "No, no, we're not going that fast. Slow down." And I felt like I was constantly being like pulled
Oh.
back type of thing. And first grade I had a I had a teacher who was a nun who really kind of turned my creativity off for a little bit, I think, or like made me hide it quite a bit because we were doing a handwriting paper, like, tracing, and then you do it on your own type of thing. And there were pictures on it that you could color in, which we were allowed to color in. And I colored those in, and I just didn't think it was enough. So I added my own drawings to it and made a border and, did all this other stuff. And everyone around me was like, Heather, that is so pretty. You have to go show sister this. You have to go show her. It's so good. And I did have an internal feeling, I vividly remember it, thinking, really? Should I do that? I don't know if I should do that. Uh, I don't know if she would like it, but everyone kept saying, it's so good. You should show her. So I showed her, and that was not the right move.
Oh.
She was not appreciative. In fact, told me that I had to now do a new one. And I was the type of student that made her wish she'd never become a teacher. So
Oh.
from, so I was like, okay, that is too much, Heather. You need to rein it in. So I did. And I became pretty quiet. And not that I wasn't, I mean, I think I was more of an, observer to begin with, but I was just afraid to go outside of the lines, literally and figuratively.
Well, it
Um,
really like was like a feels like a metaphor for really how it is, how creativity is in general. There is this um like protective nature of it that it's like, like I made a artwork over the weekend, and I share a lot of things because my business is art related, so I share as much as I can. But like this one, I was like, oh, I don't know that I'm ready to share this yet. I was like, is this good enough? Is this like, or is this going to be accepted? I really like it, but what if someone else doesn't like it? And like, there's this,
am I ready to hear that if
am,
they, right?
yeah, yeah. Am I ready for it just to be, yeah, be out in the open? and not just mine, my own personal thing that I hold dear. Like, and it's really interesting to hear, like, you had that in first grade, you had that same
Yeah.
um
I did
experience.
have that feeling, and I probably just because I knew I kind of had a conception of that teacher, like I knew that she
Yes.
wasn't going to be overly excited about something like that.
She wasn't a safe space to
No. And
share.
I had that feeling like I still remember like just that, in that bodily sensation of being like nervous and like, you know, just like I don't know, but everyone says I should. So, and I wanted to believe that
Mm.
he accepted, but I didn't have obviously the wherewithal at, 6 to handle that situation.
Oh, but
And
it's
being
kind of similar to the story with your mom. Is like you were so excited about something and you wanted
Mhm.
someone else to be just as excited as you.
But that wasn't shutting me down
That
either.
one,
That was just
yeah.
like, yeah, of course you can do. It was almost like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you be able to do that? I do that every day, sort of thing. So it didn't have the same impact on me
Yeah,
as that did. It didn't make me stop writing songs or anything. It didn't make me stop doing anything creative. Whereas this one, that experience, it didn't stop me from doing it, but I did not share it when I probably did it like much more just for myself at that
yeah,
point and wasn't as open around like letting that be seen as much. Yeah.
yeah. And that's pretty dramatic reaction from your teacher.
Yeah, it
Why
was stupid.
like
It
you
was
made
ridiculous.
me not want to be a teacher
Yeah,
because
you're
you
the type
drew
of
some
student.
stuff on the
Yeah.
borders.
And I was like the perfect student. So,
Yeah,
at that, I mean, I just was. So
yeah.
that felt devastating. And
Oh,
so I just kind of, just didn't shine as much there. And it came back though, like it wasn't like it was like forever gone. It like once I hit, like that like early teen, preteen time when emotions are super high, there's like artistic things were the way that comes
mm,
came out for me. Like I was writing stories, I was writing poetry, I was writing like all kinds of things like that. I was also reading. Obviously, reading never stopped for me, but I was, like doing all and I was drawing and doodling and doing different things, total rearranging all the time of the furniture. It was like let's try it this way. But I mean, like that is helpful. Just get a perspective change. I mean, now I see
yeah,
that as a very a big creative outlet. At the time, I'm sure that just annoyed the heck out of my mom.
yeah.
Not my dad so much, but my mom. And I would say that kind of spurt of creativity lasted for a few years, maybe like fifth grade, sixth grade to like sophomore in high school-ish. And then I felt it like a constriction of it again a bit, just because like the academic rigor and needs were high, to get into, for college and scholarships and all those things. So I feel like even though I wasn't doing a lot of fun writing for myself or like art, I was performing in musicals and plays and things like that. So I was getting some creativity there and of course always singing and things. So, but I wasn't like creating as much for myself really. It was always like with a specific outcome activity involved.
That was really
And
the
then
same for me. Yeah,
yeah,
that time period was like the period where I wrote the most poems. Like fifth
right.
grade to sophomore year of high school. So many poems.
So many because I feel like what are you going to do with all that emotion that you have
Yeah,
this all this new all these new feelings and like insight that you never noticed because you were like a true kid and now you're an adolescent and
yeah,
a teen and you see everything that's going on and you feel it too.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your stuff there.
Oh, yeah. Just well, I had kind of a sadder, a sad childhood, and that I had an alcoholic dad, and he disappeared when I was in the third grade. And so I was just very, very sad about that. I have so many poems writing, like, and I know I can still like pull up a lot of the lines for the poems because I would write them and then I would read them over and over again. It was just like, I don't know. I think maybe it was witness my, because I didn't have anybody really to share
Process it.
those
Yeah.
emotions with. So it was
Yeah.
like I never thought about it in this way before, but I would write them and then I would read them over and over again. It was almost like I was witnessing myself like at the same time, and like giving myself comfort. And also, I was so boy crazy that a lot of them are love poems too. There's a lot of love poems in there about boys that I had crushes on, and poems about friendship, and poems
Yeah.
about,
I had a
I
lot of
have one.
I have a lot of friendship poems.
Yeah. I have poems about art, and how I dream of a life, a career in art. Like it was just like it was like, yeah, I was just looking to the future, and I was processing the pain of now, and like it just writing and writing and writing and writing. And in high school, I had the same thing happen though. It was like I was so obsessed with my GPA that instead of like continuing in art, I took Latin because it was like that would help me with my SATs because
Yeah.
the root words. And I heard it was an easy A. And it was like, so I started to do stuff like that. And I was really obsessed with my GPA. And then also around that time, I noticed that in art class, I've always been like talented in art, but the art teachers always liked me, they praised my work or whatever, but there was always like one or two kids who just had that natural gift.
Mhm.
And I've seen it as a teacher too. There's just some kids that come just born knowing how to draw perfectly, and I'm like, they just, and they do it all the time, so they just get better and better. But I had in high school especially, there, I even remember their names, Stephen and David. Like they were so good, and they could just draw something perfectly, and they could paint beautifully, and I just was like, I can't do that.
Mhm.
So, and I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. So I might as well,
Right.
lean into my smartness. That's where I can really shine, is how smart I am. So I like shifted away from art into like trying to get the highest GPA and class rank possible.
Yeah, I can
Um,
relate to that. I mean, I, I, I did go away from like art stuff, although I was always in like music stuff. I always did that
mhm.
just because it was it seemed like I would never not be able to not do that. So
It's just a
and I
part
love
of you. Yeah.
yeah. So I did love that, but the whole GPA thing, you know, be the best you can be, like all of that. Yeah, I definitely was in the throes of that. And I had that experience of if if you're not going to be the best, then why are you doing it?
Why it's not worth it if unless you
Because
can be the
because I
best.
was really like in my mind, I was the best at some things or as good as I could possibly be in some things. And those are the things that I stuck with.
Yeah.
Like I took piano too when I was little, and I had like a really amazing ear. So you could play something for me, and if it was simple, I could play it back without like in a moment, I could do that. But then as things got more, and so I was learning things really by ear, not by reading music. That's what was
Hmm.
happening. So I could pick it out and play it, and people were like, wow, she's amazing. She's so good. And then as the pieces got more complicated, I couldn't pick it out by ear anymore because there was so much more going on. It wasn't, just
Yeah.
one bass line, it was just, it wasn't simple. So then I was falling behind, and that felt terrible and that felt awful. And so I stopped doing that because it was like, just too much. And I was little. I mean, I wasn't very old. I mean, I was like first, second grade. And then I took lots of other instruments well, not lots. I took clarinet and I played clarinet and saxophone. And I picked those instruments because I knew my mom couldn't play them. And I was like, I need something that she can't do because I need to feel like I can do that and she can't do it. So that's why I chose those instruments. And of course, then later on I played. I had to drop that for all the choir type things and vocal things in high school. And I of course played guitar and other things now too. But yeah, it's interesting how we let we get it's not our fault. We get sucked in to this machine is what
Yeah.
happens. Um,
Yeah.
that's what happens.
That's
But
true.
mhm.
And it's interesting when both of us, that's probably why we get along so well, is like the the wanting to be the best at something immediately without any without any work. Like that is, but then also I think about it. I'm like, no, there are times where it's like I I do put in the work to be the best at something, but I think I already know it's possible because I'm thinking
Well,
about math class because I was in
yeah,
calculus and
me
I was like,
too. Ah, ah.
I loved it. Actually, I really loved calculus. But the teacher was like, "Hey, I'm just gonna, set your expectations, y'all. Like, this is AP calculus. If you're gonna get she was like, only one, maybe two people are gonna get a 5 on this calculus AP test, and it's gonna be Vikram because Vikram was the valedictorian. And they're like, Vikram will get it. That's probably it." And I was like hell is Vikram going to be the only one? So I studied my ass off to get the 5 on that calculus AP test. And it turns out 5 people got it. And I ran into her at the grocery store. It was my senior year in the grocery store in the summer. And she was like, 5 people got 5s. I was like, yeah. And she started listing the people. And she was like, Vikram, Brad, blah, blah. And she got to the 5th and she couldn't remember who it was. And I was like, it was me. The only reason I got a 5 on that calculus AP test is to prove you wrong. And you don't even remember. So I was glad that I ran into her. But so I could stick in her face. And how that relates to creativity is though, like that mindset of having to be the best is what kept me from making art for a very long time.
Right. That perfectionistic mindset stops you from making art to begin with, but then it also can stop you in the process. Like
Yeah.
when you are actively working on something, it's
Mm-hmm.
so hard. That's where compassion comes in. I mean, like you have to be able to give yourself some grace to understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling and what there are things you can do to help with that too.
What are those things?
Oh,
Tell
well,
us.
well, it's interesting that that early memory of mine with the Holly Hobby House that I remember like see when I saw the outside, cardboard thing, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so great." I remember like just loving how it looked on the outside. There was a window in it, like just
Mm-hmm.
but when I say window, I was just a cutout. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but there was a drawn not drawn, but like painted on flower box on the front and things like that. So it was very colorful on the outside. And when I went in, I was like, well, this is not gonna do. Like this is just not gonna be, this is not gonna work for me. So creating that space for myself that I knew was gonna be like, this is just for me. This is just my internal like place for really for creativity, but I didn't have those
Mm-hmm.
obviously those thoughts at that point. But like I remember bringing in something soft, like a blanket. I remember bringing in either it was a pillow or a beanbag or something like that. I remember drawing things on the walls to make it look prettier, even though it was probably just a bunch of scribbles. I mean, it was probably just color, like going
Yeah.
like that, but it was what I wanted to do. So I was making a safe like comfortable space for myself, which is what I talk to authors about and talk to people and writers to do. Like you need to have your nervous system be regulated and feel internally safe enough to be able to create. And how do we do that? Well, there's lots of things you can do, some of them external, some of them internal. But having an external space where you feel comfortable is one of the big things. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be anything big, but like literally making sure you're not cold or you're not hot or like too hot, or you have water, or like really basic things. And then like you can also move into other things like, oh, I like looking out a window that where I can see some green, or if you don't have that available, but that that's something that is helpful to you, having a plant, or like there's things that, but it is funny to, not funny, but like amazing to me really, that I think as children we just know things that we forget later on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's like our adult life is so much about like unlearning everything we learned since high school and coming back to like who we were as children. And to me, it feels so when I really look at myself in like elementary school, like upper elementary school, middle school, I guess they like age 10, like who I was then is it's the most true version of me almost. It's just me without all the crap that like got piled on
all the
for a long
expectation,
time. Yeah.
obligation, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating because I stopped making art because well the perfectionism thing came in too because I started studying art history
Mm.
and I discovered
And
art
like
history.
looking at all these masters and
No,
you're
they're
like,
like
ah.
yeah, I discovered art history in my junior year of high school. Between junior and senior year, the English teacher took a group of kids to Europe every year for like 28 days, and you go to like all the countries. I forgot how many countries we went to. It was like 7 or 8 or something. And we did a whole class every Sunday for like a whole semester leading up to it to learn about all the countries and learn about the art. And so it was like this really immersive experience. And I go to these museums, and it's the first time I'm seeing like real art before because I lived in Amarillo, Texas. We didn't really have museum. Like the closest big city from Amarillo is like 5 hours away. And so I never got to see real art. And then suddenly I'm in Europe and I'm like looking at all this art and I just completely fell in love. And so I got a degree in art history. I started working in museums. I started just like obsessing over looking at art and art history and all the artists. And I'm like, there's no way I could be as good as all of these artists that I've been studying my whole life. There's no way I can create something as powerful as they can create with as much talent as they can create. I was just like, I don't have the ideas. I don't have the technical skill. I don't have like, there's just like all the things I don't have. And so I
Right.
just kind of released that as like, oh, I guess I'm not an artist. Um,
And that definition of artist is so narrow.
it is. It's so narrow until 2021 when I was in the middle of like a burnout and I was rethinking all of my work and I was like, how do I show people the power of the work that I do of looking at art and connecting with it? And like, how do I, I was just meditating on that. And the answer that I got that just like dropped in my head, I don't know where it came from, but it was like through your art. And I like lost it. I was like, there's no, I can't. I was like, I don't make art. First, I can't make money out of it. That was like the first thing I thought, which was kind of gross, but that was one of the first thoughts. And two, I was like, no, I don't have the talent to do that. But the answer was like that like you have to make art
Oh,
message
clear.
was,
Yeah.
oh, it was so clear. I had to listen. And so I stalled for a good amount of time, like made my art studio and I thought about the type of art I was going to make sure I had the supplies, organized the supplies, like took a good, like, I don't know, 9 months before I actually started making art again. And
Mhm.
then, but then I had to disassemble like all those stories I taught myself about what it means to be an artist and what it means to be creative. And I had to like break that all apart before I could start making art, and
Yeah.
it's changed my whole life. I've like since I started since I did that. I feel like a different person. Well, I'm not even a different person. I feel like a more true version of myself than I
Yeah, I
than
was
I
just gonna
am.
say like back a little bit back to that
Yeah.
10-year-old self.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a not exactly the same, but similar in that. So I do remember when I went to college, this like icebreaker activity with my dorm floor where we had to like draw something that was or say something or like put something on paper that like kind of described you or whatever. And I wrote Goddess of Creativity on it. And after I did, it felt so true and I felt so good about it. And then after I was done, I was like, oh no, I have to put this up on the wall.
You're not supposed to stand out, Heather. You're supposed to be just good enough. You're supposed to be perfect so that
Right.
no one will notice you. You're not
Yeah.
supposed to like call
But
yourself a
also
goddess.
elevate you.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, all right, and I did, I mean, I did a lot of creative things in college, but again, it was usually in the pursuit of something. I mean, I was still singing, I was still doing a lot of things like that. I was doing a lot of writing, and I took poetry classes, which I adored, and I did a lot of writing poetry in there, but I didn't do a lot of outside of any of those classes writing
Mm-hmm.
really as much as I had done earlier on. And then when after I graduated, I started working a publishing company. So there was reading everyone else's work and making everyone else's work better and learning some hard things about the publishing industry and which kind of made me feel like I don't know if I want to. I mean, I still want to write, but I don't know. This is kind of this corporate machine isn't exactly what I envisioned it to be, and I don't really like it. There's no compassion there, or very, very, very like maybe just on an individual basis, obviously with people, but like as a whole, no. So I was doing a lot of singing during that time too, outside, like weekend job type of thing. But I really was not writing too much. I did a little bit of writing, poetry around the time that I met my husband, and I had a lot of emotions and things like that. So I did some poetry writing at that point until basically till right after we got married, and then that kind of shut down again a bit. And then I didn't really do a lot of writing until I left traditional publishing. And it took a while to kind of recalibrate my nervous system really to be at a place where I could create again. And then it really came in a flood and I was writing a lot more and uh I wrote a book. I mean, I did two books and then I did a book with my husband and different things like that. But what unlocked things for me there, I think, I started, obviously, I was doing this work to kind of regulate my nervous system, even though I didn't know at the time that's what I was doing. And then learning about compassion and compassionate practices and how they can really help you. And when I found that it wasn't like specifically for creativity, that's just what I used it for and life in general. But like,
Yeah.
like that's what I noticed. I realized this is a perfect match because if you don't feel safe enough, your creativity, you can't access it because you're in a threat response constantly and you can't get out of that. So,
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the things that helped me so much is, I've realized I had this big realization in 2021 and I, took a while to start making art again. But right when I finally started making art again is when I started working with you. And it was, you were kind of teaching me that those compassionate
mhm,
processes as I was creating.
mhm,
And I think that there probably would have been many times where I would have like stopped or I would have gotten stuck or I wouldn't have, taken the risks that I took if I didn't have like you and your influence as a like grounding energy throughout the whole process.
Well, that feels
So,
good.
yeah. And so I feel like this can lead to a whole other conversations in different episodes about like the flood of creativity, about,
Yes.
what happened next and that sort of thing. But I feel like this is kind of maybe a good stopping point for this particular conversation.
I think so too.
Yeah. So we'll be back with more conversations about creativity.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Spacious Creative. We hope you found inspiration and insights to give you some momentum on your creative journey.
We're excited to invite you to our free workshop coming on July 24th. Trust your why. Your creative comfort zone needs you.
In this workshop, we'll explore the widely held misconception that growth only happens when you are out of your comfort zone. You can sign up at cindyingram.com/trust.
We can't wait to connect with you again in our next episode. Until then, trust your creativity and hold your inspiration and yourself with compassion.